move things right along. All right. So welcome to Wednesday. What is this? May 25th. All right. So some general housekeeping. Monday is Memorial Day. We will not be meeting. And so we will resume on Wednesday. Wednesday might be a little bit longer, just try to cram in everything because we have our modules set up even when this program is not offered on a day that it falls on a holiday. So we want to make sure you guys get all of the information. But Monday, like I said, since Monday is a holiday, we will not infringe upon your holiday. So enjoy your time with your family and friends. And for some of you, it gives you time to catch up on the homework, which brings us to another fun topic. Some of y'all are holding your homework hostage. Talk to me. What's going on?
Okay, so with the homework, sometimes I get a little undecisive, especially when it comes to like with the stakeholders and things like that, and thinking through the process and who you say. So, should I put the banks, but I don't have any contacts with the banks? Should I just put banks? Um, and I'm actually detailing out the other entities out that I have partnerships with or, a relationship with already. But if we don't know who the contacts and what have you, is it okay if we just put that information there and website and all of that good stuff, but we do not have a point of contact, so to speak?
Yeah. So when we talked on Monday, we said this is a living document. So as you're getting those contacts, you're adding to them. So those spaces are there so you can add them as you go. Because say if the banks is a realistic stakeholder, you want to find a point of contact there so you can interview, right? And we'll talk about some of that today. And so as you build up to that, you want a space so you can have it all in one space, but we're not expecting you to have that immediately. We just want to see like your draft to know that we're heading in the right direction of identifying the stakeholders and even with all the other homeworks, right? We just want to see like where you are kind of coming out the gate to see like, hey, you might have missed something during that class. Let's kind of, break it down a little bit further for you, or great job, push your thinking more in this little area. But we can't do that if you're holding them hostage. So I need you guys to submit your homework assignments so we can give you some feedback, because like I said, we don't want to get too far in and realize you've actually kind of been off track, module 2, right? And, right now we're going into module 4 tonight. And so it's really important that y'all release them. It's not going to be perfect. We're not expecting perfection. We're not expecting excellence. This is training for your entrepreneurship journey, right? Entrepreneurship is going to require that you make decisions with like not enough information. You're going to have a pot half empty and you're going to have to make a critical decision at some point in time, and it's going to scare the bejesus out of you. Get used to it, right? This is part of your journey, right? And you just have to release and trust that if it's the wrong decision, you'll make the right one next time. And that's okay. This is a safe space to do that. But this is truly what the journey is like. You're not going to always have all the answers. It's not going to feel like you're doing it just right. That's okay, right? You're going to chug forward and you're learning as you're growing. It's a fail fast process is true nature of entrepreneurship. And you can't fail fast if you're not willing to release what you have into the atmosphere to learn from it, right? So I want you guys to get used of releasing these things, figuring it out, giving some feedback. And if our feedback is not, you're perfect, you're amazing, that's okay. That's an opportunity to grow, right? And that's what we're hoping to push you towards. So I just really want you guys to release so we can see where you are, so we can help you. Is there anybody struggling or have any challenges with finishing the homework? I saw your hand up, Nadine, but we already talked. But that's also another good point. We understand life happens, right? And so if life is happening and coming at you fast right now, just let us know. Like, so we just want to make sure that you're not like, just I'm sitting here in a class, but I really have no intentions of following through, right? Like we just like, if you talk to us and we kind of know what's going on, then it's totally okay. Like we totally get it. And we're just here to help you, but you have to communicate that so we know where you are. This is also another entrepreneurship lesson. You will meet contacts and people in your network, right? Follow up. Even if you don't have the pieces to follow up right then, it's okay. Let them know that, right? Like, hey, I know I talked and I said I was going to have this to you, but I'm still working on these different pieces. I'll reach back out soon. Communication is like one of the like lost arts, I feel like, in entrepreneurship, where people drop the ball so much. And then when they resurface, it's kind of like, I already have a bad taste in my mouth about you, right? And so you want to be very careful that you don't burn those bridges unintentionally or come off as someone who doesn't follow through or is unreliable, right? And so these are the messages you silently send to some of these collaborators if you kind of, present some of those habits. And it's not that hard to shoot a message and be like, hey, we thought we were going to be able to get this done, but some things have come up and it's delayed, my ability to kind of, push through on this or this, but I will get it to you as soon as I can, right? Like that constant communication makes a really big difference, right? You want to be careful in how you word things because you don't want to look like, you overpromise and underdeliver, but you want to be able to communicate effectively. And that is a whole like, you get marketing 101 kind of how you communicate with your networks and that those type of things. But it just always pay attention to, making sure that you have timely follow-up. But anyway, that's enough Wanda lecturing on that. But I just wanted to make sure that we were good on the homeworks and like no one's not submitting it because they're still having issues with the platform or they're just truly lost and confused or just don't know what to do. I see your hand, Chris. What's up?
Yeah, I just forgot today was Wednesday. But as far as the homeworks, so I understand that we're supposed to make like the boxes of the what was important or high and low interest and all that stuff. Are we supposed to print out that paper and fill it out ourselves, or do we make like our own box on a piece of paper or take a picture of it and send it to you?
That wasn't the homework. That was something we did in class. The homework was the other one. It's a Word document in the resources of that week's assignment. And in that Word document, yep, Lisa's holding it up right there, stakeholder analysis matrix. That is the homework that you're completing. And so it's essentially a more detailed version of the boxes.
Okay.
I screwed that up. I will send that one over.
It's okay.
I sent the other one. Sorry.
It's all good. We just did it in a step process because I didn't want to overwhelm you. So it was let's make a list of the people, let's put them in the boxes, and then now let's put them in a way that you can go back to it and remember who, what, when, and the details of each one of them.
Okay.
And if I may, I talked to Katie a little because I was more scrambled, not so much on if I had a contact person or something like Sylvia said, but like the high, middle, low. I had a real hard time with figuring out where they fit. So I printed it out and I made the box a little bigger and I wrote in pencil, which was helpful for me to do it because I'm a hands-on like that. But now I see the benefit of I got to type it into the boxes because they'll expand as it's I love what you said, a living document. So, but I'm still stuck on how to figure out low, middle, high, if that matters for tonight. I hope it'll clarify.
Well, so with that, remember we said, remember the high, middle, low was if you kind of went on the quadrants, but if you did a circle one, then you can just put essential, important, like that across the board. So you go with whatever helps you understand those categories and you fill in the descriptive terms needed, right? Again, this is just really for you. So when these individuals or similar individuals reach out or you connect with them, you know how to engage them. So whatever helps get you there.
Well, and I guess
right or wrong answers with this, right? It's really just kind of what helps you.
Right. Well, I guess I think my thing as I look through it, I realized I think nobody's high. And that's okay though, at this point, right? Is what I think.
Well, we said your key customers, your target audience.
That's all I have right now.
Huh?
That's all I have right now.
That's fine, but that's still somebody is high, right?
Yeah.
If your only high is your target customers, that's okay. Okay. But you have a high. Yeah. Good. Chris?
I don't have Word, so can I use Pages? I don't know.
Yeah, we talked about this last time. You can use Pages. You can also do it in Google Doc.
Google Doc, that's right.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. I just didn't know how to submit it because when I tried Google Doc, but it didn't have like a shareable function or I can like print it. Well, not print it, but like download it and submit it to you guys.
It does. If you need some help with that, let us know.
Oh, thank you. I overlooked it then. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, you can definitely fill everything out in Google Doc and download it as a PDF and submit it that way. Or a Word document or whatever. You can download it as whatever document you want to and submit it that way. Other questions? All right, so we're good on getting the homework in. We also know Monday is a holiday, so that should be your time if you know while you're having a good time over the weekend with your family and friends to also play catch up. So by the time we meet on Wednesday, we are caught up and ready to rock and roll. Yes? Awesome. All right, so we're gonna jump right in. And so we left off last week on not last week, gosh, Monday felt like a week ago. That's absolutely insane. We left off on Monday kind of talking about stakeholder analysis. And that's important because we needed to know the categories of all the different people that we will interact with. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask. And so this today, what we're going to focus on is interviewing, and understanding the categories of people helps us to understand who to interview, why we interview, and how to interact with them. I can't quite share my screen just yet. 1 second. JB, I need screen share. There we go. All right. Oh, the other housekeeping is the one-on-one sessions. I was going to send out the links, and I too forgot Monday was a holiday, so I had times available for Monday. Have to recalibrate that and get that out to you guys by tomorrow morning. Before I move on, Katie or JB, is there any other housekeeping that you guys had to mention? I forgot to kind of chime in with you before we moved on.
I'm all good.
Okay.
I'm all good too. Just if anyone has problems with their assignments, please never like hesitate to reach out to me. I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Oh, one more thing. Katie is grading your assignments. I have had my overachiever go-getters freak out about grades. This is a course that you are taking at your own free will. This is not affecting your future, your finances, or anything of that nature. Please don't freak out. If your grade is lower, it's because she's trying to get you to make some updates, corrections, push your thinking on some things to kind of, like, hey, flag, bring this to your attention. You might have misunderstood something or make some corrections in a particular place. That's all that really means. I've had people that got a lower score and freaked out, like, I've never had a score this low in my life. I understand. This isn't that kind of party though. So just want to put that disclaimer on there. It's more so to bring certain things to your attention, to realize some corrections that need to be made. All right, diving right in.
One thing to go along with that, Wanda, is if I've asked for some clarifications for you to like dig a little deeper or refocus a little bit, the best way to get me those, the platform won't let you upload another document, I don't think. So the best way to get that is just just send me a message using the platform, a direct message, and you can attach a document there. That's it. Go ahead, Wanda.
All right. So diving back in, last time we got together, we started to talk about design thinking 101 and the different pieces. And so when you think about design thinking, remember I said it's a feedback loop. So you're always kind of, going through this process where empathy, define, ideate, prototype, test, implement, but it doesn't always kind of a continuous loop. You might do empathy, define, ideate, go back to empathy, define, ideate before you get to prototyping, right? Like, it's all good. the more you refine your processes and understand your audiences and how you're meeting their needs and problems, the better off you are. So it's one of those what is it? Test many, build once kind of a thought process. And so you want to be in that cycle. So in the first few weeks, our biggest focus, we're going to work through the 3 main phases of design thinking: understand, explore, and materialize. And then we'll visit some entrepreneurship knowledge as it pertains to particular business. So today we're going to dive into understand, which is empathizing more. And so we talked about empathy a little bit on Monday. But essentially, a quick review of that is empathy is the foundation to everything that we do throughout creating our product. When you're working to develop empathy, you're trying to understand the people within the context of the problem you're trying to address. And so it's important that we know what they do and why they do it and how they feel about things, how they think about the world and what's meaningful to them. It's always about our audience and how do we get in their head. And and I always tell people, like, it's if you think about your movie and your favorite characters, everything they do has a reason, right? And you're trying to figure out the same thing with your audience, right? Where they're buying decisions, their reasons not to engage in certain services, there is a reason, and you're trying to understand that thought process. And you can begin to develop empathy by observing people and engaging people. For example, you're watching, to observe people, you're watching people's behavior and you're seeing how they react to certain situations. So for example, if I'm trying to figure out a challenge about laundry, I'm going to go watch people do laundry, right? And if you want to figure out the intake process in a barbershop, the easiest way to figure that out, go sit in a barbershop and just kind of watch the interactions between the customer and the barber and that flow, right? And so you learn a lot about people by watching, because sometimes just by asking or kind of just looking at the research, it tells you just half of the story, but we learn the most from people by talking to them and watching them and their behaviors. And so some of the things that we look at is learning how to ask the right question, asking as many questions as you can, not stopping to discuss or judge, but learning how to ask questions, writing down the questions as it was stated, and statements into questions, learning how to change your statements into questions to get better questions, and prioritizing questions, right? So that's kind of the center of learning how to interview. When we come to interviewing though, the biggest thing is you need to kind of figure out what you need, right? So what are you collecting that interview data on? Is it a notebook? Is it your phone? Something to document your interview, right? Allowing enough time for an interview, right? Some of the best interviews are with some of the most long-winded people. And if you gave yourself 10 minutes in your schedule for this interview and this person want to talk for 45 minutes, and the first 10 minutes is them kind of getting comfortable with you, because interviewing, you're building rapport with that person, right? I need to know you before I really kind of get in. And even if it's not like personal information, but you just got to get a little comfortable with people. And even if you're interviewing friends and family, they're used to you in a certain sector. So they're used to engaging with you a particular way, but the interview sometimes can feel very formal and you got to get them a little comfortable. So it might take a little time to kind of get into that flow. And so you want to allow enough time for that. And not to say every interview is going to be 45 minutes to an hour, but you just want to give enough time, engage how long that's going to do. And that comes sometimes by just testing your protocol, and constant and having and consent from your interviewees, right? That's really important. People, especially now, have a heightened sense of sensitivity to privacy. And so you want to be mindful of that and respectful. So say, for example, you decide you want to record your interviews. Please ask your interviewees permission first. And if they're not comfortable with it, then you have to respect that. And if you're taking notes, you have to also ask them, is it okay if I take notes? And you explain. Oftentimes people are a lot more comfortable if you're explaining what you're doing with it. Like, I'm just taking notes so I can remember this later as I go to organize it. Like, I'm not great with keeping things in my head, like if that's okay. And people tend to be more comfortable if you're explaining what you're doing with their information. And so being upfront and explaining that to your interviewees is really important. So what is it that you're doing, right? what is the goal and essence of the interview? You're to capture your findings. The things that you're actually doing is, if you have a partner, you can tag team, but you're basically, you want to capture what you see, what you hear, what you feel, your interview is feeling. And part of that, as humans, we express ourselves in a range of different ways, right? And so you can ask me a question and the words I'm saying does not match what my body is saying. All those things are things that we're trying to capture, right? So you can say, like, you know, how do you like such and such? Yeah, I like it okay, right? But my whole body just told you a whole different thing than I like it okay, right? Like, you know, it's like, like it might not be the right word for how you're feeling right now, right? And those are opportunities to dig in, right? When people are kind of giving you these cues, and some people might not be that dramatic. It might be like, you know, just a deep sigh, right? Dig into that, right? Those are opportunities to learn more. What are those things that they're not saying? What are the questions that you're not asking that is giving you some additional insight into, you know, truly how that interviewee feels, right? And who do you talk to? A range of people in your target demographic. Truly, in a program like this, the rule of thumb is 100. The rule of thumb is you talk to 100 people before you really understand your audience. And I'm not talking about 100 different stakeholders. I'm talking about 100 of your target audience in addition to your other stakeholders. Now, I won't make you guys do that in this program because of time, but it is something that, again, everything we do in this program is a step one to a continued process, right? And so if you start interviewing for our program, don't stop there. You're constantly interviewing people and constantly collecting data, right? Because honestly, until you get to that 100, you really don't know your audience. And then you're making a lot of decisions with a lot of misinformation, right? And so the more people you talk to, the better you understand what your customer truly wants and need, the better you know how to pinpoint what's the problem you're actually solving for them. What is the need they really need met, right? Because some things are feel-good needs, right? And you might be identifying that in some of those initial interviews, but what you might realize, there's a deeper need that's being unmet. And if you address that, that's where the opportunities are. And so to do that, the more people, the more variety of people from your targeted different demographics is really what's going to get you there. So interviewing for empathy is different than just interviewing, right? We've all seen interviews, right? If you watch the news or if you watch a podcast or anything where we've seen kind of these exchanges, right? Oftentimes that style of interviewing is more for information, right? So tell me how, you know, tell me what happened, or tell me about, you know, about something very specific, right? I'm trying to get information. But the goal of empathy is, the goal of interviewing for empathy is to identify individual needs, right? And uncover insights to guide your design. So empathy is about having open-ended conversations with the people for whom you produce content, program, and experience in order to uncover their explicit and implicit needs. And so it's not yes or no questions, right? What time did that happen? Where are you going here, right? So it's open-ended questions because you're trying to get in that deeper level of not just what they say, but it's what the things that they don't say, so you understand their need better. So when we try to figure out how to interview, one of the things we ask a lot is why, right? We never say usually when asking a question. We encourage stories. We look for inconsistencies, right? Right? If you know, you say, again, like when I was giving the example before where I'm saying one thing, but my body language is saying another, right? That's an inconsistency. Those are the things that help us pay attention to those nonverbal cues, right? Don't be afraid of silence, right? Sometimes when we're asking questions of people, sometimes, and we experience all this a lot, right? Sometimes you do things, you're not even really thinking about it anymore. So when someone asks you, you got to pause, like, well, that is a good question. Do I really enjoy it, right? Like I went through this whole stage where I was trying to give up sweets. And so part of my struggle, my decision to myself is I would only eat sweets if it tasted really good. And so I would ask other people, like, does this taste like someone's grandmother made it in a life-changing experience, right? And then people would pause and be like, actually, no, it's kind of dry. It's kind of nasty. And they're still sitting there eating them. And I'm like, why do we do this to ourselves, right? We kind of just get in a habit of doing things, but we don't really pause and ask why, right? And so sometimes when you're asking someone a question about something they do every day or a service they use all the time, they're not thinking about it because they've just kind of gotten into that routine. So don't be afraid of the silence while they really think, because sometimes that's really how they're giving you that honest answer, right? And so that time of reflect doesn't need to be filled up with something. Give them that time to get there, right? Don't suggest answers to your questions. And sometimes, especially as entrepreneurs, we're so eager, right? We're so eager to get them there, right? And you see them kind of dancing around the answers you want to hear, but they're not quite saying it. So you want to say it for them and put it in their mouth. Like, so you mean this, right? Like, you really want this, right? And it's like, that's not the safe way to do, because what you'll do, because sometimes they'll just agree with you. People are people pleasers and naturally like, yeah, sure. But hearing them describe the problem gives you another additional layer of insight of how to look at it. So even though they eventually say what you want to hear, hearing it from them gives you a way of shaping it. Because what I like to do, right? I hear an answer from one interviewee and I rephrase that into a question to the next interviewee, right? And then I kind of see, where do some of the things line up, right? What's consistent across my interviewees? And is this the same problem? Or when the interviewee be like, well, actually, and they'll give me more insight of a question that I never even thought to ask if I didn't hear something from that first interviewee. So you really, really just want to make sure that you're listening for those answers, right? To your questions. Ask questions normally, right? Sometimes we go into this and we just go into like, because you've been thinking about this problem for quite some time. Your interviewee has not been on this journey with you, right? So we go into like fact mode, like, all right, give me the facts and information. I just want the facts. And they're like, whoa, right? So be very conversational, right? Make sure you're making them comfortable to speak about these things, and be, just really making sure that you're putting them at ease so the conversation flows. Don't ask binary questions. So yes and no questions don't get you very far. All they're going to do is confirm the biases that you already have. So make sure that your questions are open-ended. And one of the ways that we do that is, I always say, you write all your questions down. Just get all the questions that you can think of out of your head. Then you go back through your questions and think about all the questions that are yes or no questions and rephrase them into open-ended questions, right? And so that's kind of the way where you got to get it out your head first and all the things you want to ask. And then you rephrase them, and then you play around with them until they're giving you kind of that rich data that you're looking from your participants. And make sure you're prepared to capture. There are times where like I'll meet people who are great interviewees, and I'm like, man, I should interview you. And they're like, great, let's do it right now. And I'm like, I got nothing. And they're like, well, I got 10 minutes. That's all I got right now. And I'm sitting there scrambling, trying to find my phone's on 1%. And I'm like, okay, I got to take notes. I gotta. So just be ready, right? Like make sure like when you get those opportunities, you're ready to capture that data, because you'll be amazed like how you can catch people at the most random time and get some of the best information. But if you're not ready and they're dumping all this good data and then they leave and then you're sitting there like, what did they say, right? Was it no, and like you missed that great opportunity to feed that into your system of learning how to build a better solution for the problems that you're trying to solve. So always be ready to capture that, right? And so creating questions, learning how to ask the right question is an art, right? And so brainstorming questions is kind of the first piece. But one of the things you do is I sometimes, just to kind of help seed my question, Google is my best friend when it comes to that, because I am probably not the first or last person to do an empathy interview, right? And even though they're not asking the same exact questions I'm asking, someone else is asking enough questions to kind of help jog my memory on like, oh yeah, this is how to phrase this question, right? I might know exactly what I want to ask, but I don't know how to phrase it where it makes sense to that other person. So I'll just do a Google search on some of this stuff, right? But like I said, some of the things you already know based off of kind of what we've been putting together. So you want to do that initial brain dump, right? And so then identify, focus, theme, and order your questions, right? And we'll talk about how that works, but you want to make sure you're not saying, well, remember the question I asked you at the beginning of this interview? This is a follow-up for that one, like 10 questions later, right? So you want to make sure the order of your questions kind of makes sense, especially if there's parts to the problem that you want to unpack in a meaningful way to kind of like, pull ideas and thoughts out of your interviewee in a pattern that makes sense, right? So reorder leading and biased question, expand your yes and no type questions, make vague questions more specific, ensure your questions are eliciting feelings, eliminate redundancy, and simplify questions, right? And so keep it simple. That's one of the biggest things. I am notorious for this. I'll ask 5 questions in one question. And my interviewee is like, wait, okay, so what are you asking me? And then I'll break it down to like 3 questions in one. And they're like, oh, okay, I still don't know what you're asking, right? And so you want to make sure your conjunction questions, break them down into all separate questions. Ask them one at a time so you can, because what happens is information gets lost because they're going to try to jam pack that answer with all the things that they're thinking of because that's how you presented the question. And then it's that much harder to unpack, right? And so you don't want the if and kind of question, right? You just want question 1, question 2, right? Like, and just go that way so they know what exactly you're asking at each time. And if there's something interesting to follow up, you know how to follow up because you know specifically this was the question I asked at that time, right? And so just pay attention on simplifying and redundancy, right? Sometimes redundancy can be necessary, right? If they said something and you need clarification, then you're like, hey, to follow up on that question, blah, 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 right? It's clarification, not redundancy. You don't want to ask the same question and they're like, hey, I answered that already, right? Be very clear on what you're trying to get at. And this is by planning and preparing ahead of time. And then make sure I covered all of that. Oh, encourage stories. Whether or not the stories people are telling are true, they reveal how they think about the world, and ask questions that get people telling stories, right? So tell me about experience you had when, or tell me about the last time you did, right? And so just trying to get people to get in that storytelling mode, you'll be amazed at the type of information that comes out, right? Like I always used to say, like, think of an example of, you ask someone how to do something, right? Say, and I always use the example of cooking because I hate cooking, but I'll ask my mom how to make one of her favorite dishes, right? And she'll tell me her process. But then when I watched her, it's about 5 or 6 steps she did not mention at all. And I'm wondering why I cannot recreate this dish to save my life. And then when I asked her, she was like, well, I didn't tell you that because everybody knows that. No, the non-cooker does not know that step. The non-cooker would have never known that step, right? And so so a lot of things that we do become so intuitive. If you ask me, there's pieces I'm going to drop. But if I tell a story, it's built into my story and I don't even realize it, right? And so that's kind of those opportunities to capture, right, how people think about the world and how they see these different things, right? I think that is, I mentioned don't suggest your answers. This can unintentionally get people to say things that agree with your expectations. Ask questions neutrally. People pick up on you, right? So if you ask questions and you're excited about it, or you're like feeling like not so great about this, they're going to pick up on that, right? So tell me what you really think about. And don't you hate when people, right? Like they're going to pick up on that and feed on that, right? So make sure you check yourself as you're going into these interviews. So when you say stuff like, so what do you think about hearing from, this artist? Or is a better question would be, do you think an online videos of artists in a sortable playlist would be great? Because the first question doesn't imply that there is a right answer, right? So you don't want to lead in to like, this is kind of the answer I want to get from you, so they'll respond that way. You want to be very neutral in how you think about your question. So when you're thinking about your interview, it's not just the questions that you are trying to get data out of, right? You got to do the pleasantries, right? And this is something I suck at because I'm a straight to the point kind of person, right? Like if I say, this is what I'm here to talk about, this is what I'm here to talk about. You know what I mean? And so like my mom used to have this thing where I get up in the morning and I ask her questions and she's like, well, good morning to you too. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's nice. So what I was saying, right? And so like, you want to make sure you go through the pleasantries, introduce yourself, introduce the project. Why are you even asking these questions? What's the purpose of this interview, right? Build rapport, right? You want to ask them about them and their day, right? If someone scheduled a time to do an interview with you at a particular time, but who knows what happened right before that scheduled interview. So as you're like, hey, are you doing all right today? Actually, no, like my life just fell apart an hour ago. Pause. Do you need to do this interview right now, right? Do we need to reschedule, right? Like, because some people will honor that time if they say that's the time they committed to, but realistically, are you actually going to get useful information if you're kind of in overload mode, right? It might make sense to reschedule. You want to make sure you know that going in and offer that as an option, right? And even if they say, no, let's continue, understand that might shape the kind of interview you're having, right? And take all of that into consideration. And so once you do your intro your project, build rapport, evoke stories, explore emotions, answer some questions, thank you, and wrap up, right? So all of that is part of your interview protocol, right? And you want to be, like I said, you want to think through all those different pieces because it's important that you are very human with your interviewees, right? They are a person that is taking time out to share information about themselves to make your journey better, to make your journey as an entrepreneurship, as a problem solver, as someone who is exploring to build amazing solutions better. Respect that, right? And so these are some of the things that we want to pay attention to. I had this slide already. So what we're going to do is we're going to explore some interview do's and don'ts. And I have a video that I'm going to throw to the end for the sake of time. So we're going to look at a couple of interview do's and don'ts just to kind of learn some stuff here.
Empathy do's.
So Scott, thanks so much for taking some time to talk to me for my class project. As you know, I'm really interested in procrastination. And you were saying earlier that you do procrastinate. So I just wanted to ask you kind of like, what's an example of when you procrastinated recently?
Oh man, last night was probably the most recent, if not this morning. So.
Well, that's strange. I'm not exactly sure what happened there. Let me. Oops.
Last night I had this situation where I have something that I have to finish tonight, and it's a graphic design thing. And then a friend of mine asked me if I would help him out with the graphic design thing that he has due on Friday. And so I was like, sure. And then I started doing his before doing mine.
Why?
I think it has to do with, like, I've known this deadline was coming up for a while, and there's a thing where I need to have a lot of pressure to be able to really make a decision quickly. And I think in the back of my head, I almost know that if I don't force some time pressure, I'm going to spend a ton of time on it, but not actually do it much better. So I kind of like am willing to do other things when I should be doing that thing. I don't know if it always works in my favor though.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think a lot of times I kind of overdo it, and maybe I'm not acknowledging that there's also like a little anxiety or fear in the back that, am I going to do it well? If I wait, then maybe I can like blame that I only had 2 hours to do it on the fact that I didn't do it as perfectly as I would.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So how would you describe that behavior to somebody else who you were like counseling or coaching?
I would say it's this sort of like self-trickery where you take on another project to avoid doing the project that you should be doing.
Interesting. Very interesting. Okay.
Alrighty, we're gonna go into one more do.
Empathy do's.
So Scott, thanks so much for taking some time to talk to me.
Wait, hold on. That's the same one.
As you know, I'm really interested in procrastination.
That is the same one. 1 second.
Empathy do's, round 2.
So Scott, actually, I'm like still thinking about that story you told me earlier in the interview about how you took on somebody else's project that had a sooner deadline than your project, even though that was an important project. And I guess I'm wondering, like, how do you think you compare as a procrastinator? Do you think other people procrastinate more than you or less than you? Like, where do you fall on that spectrum?
No, I work a lot, and so I never feel like I'm really procrastinating. Like, I think if you looked at me, you wouldn't say, oh, there's a procrastinator, because I'm always doing something. But a lot of times I'm kind of doing something. It's not that I shouldn't be doing, but I'm doing something instead of doing the thing I really need to do. So I think for other people, it might look like I'm not a procrastinator, but I feel like I am.
Interesting.
So I just want to pay attention to some of the things that was happening there. Notice that in her role, she was very engaged in what he was saying, even in his stories. It's the, okay, so that positive feedback and reinforcement is also very important. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying you got to be super fake about it, but just, actually be in the conversation, right? And also with the follow-up question, she was, even if she knew, she acted a little naive. Like, so tell me, when you say you take on other people's projects, when you know you have your own, like, what happens there, right? Like, even though you feel like you know what's happening, you still are asking because you need to hear it from them, right? Because it's that, again, you're exploring the world from their point of view, and understanding that is very important to you understanding your entrepreneur. So we're going to do one last don't.
That's the rule. Empathy don'ts.
So Scott, thanks for taking some time to talk with me. As you know, I'm studying procrastination for my Taming Temptation class. The D School, it's a great class. It's really, you should have applied actually. It was just awesome class. So anyway, what I want to ask you is, can you tell me how procrastination is a problem for you?
Procrastination is a problem for me because I do it all the time.
Okay, so it's like a big problem.
Yeah.
Okay, is it like a really big problem?
Yeah, I mean, I do it all the time, so I'd call that a big problem.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So,
so notice she's not getting as much useful information out of the interview, right? She cut him off, and then is it a big problem? That's a yes or no question, right? And then is a big problem? Yeah, that's still a yes or no question, right? It's not phrased in a way that she could actually get utility out of it. And I cut that one off a little early. Let me get it in there.
Procrastination is a problem for me because I do it all the time.
okay, so it's like a big problem.
Yeah.
Okay, is it like a really big problem?
Yeah, I mean, I do it all the time, so I'd call that a big problem.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So, just thinking about the solutions to this problem. So, like, what would help you stop being such a bad procrastinator?
I guess if I procrastinated less, or maybe if there was somebody around me who wasn't a procrastinator or something.
Not asking them for solutions. So that's something people would do very frequently. Ask them to be their own problem solver. You know what I mean? You can kind of, like, one of the questions I always ask is kind of, in a world of rainbows and bunnies with unlimited resources, how would you do these things differently? But I'm not asking you like how to solve that problem. Just kind of fantasize, if that problem didn't exist, how would your life be different or better, right? And so that's kind of a way to kind of think about asking them, how they envision things, but not asking them to create solutions. Lisa, you had your hand up?
No, I guess I was just kind of thinking on that, but aren't we trying to get them to tell us how they feel it would be solved? But you kind of said that, like, with unlimited resources, or, if you had it your way, how would you like it to be, is kind of asking for a solution, but it's not. I see the difference.
Yeah. So remember, going back to our first session of John can't read, right? Like, if John didn't have the issue of reading, what would his world look like, right? John would be writing novels, he'll be reading stories to his kids. And so that's what you're trying to get at, right? What does their world look like if the problem wasn't there, or if the need was met? Because then you already have a sense of the problem space. But if I know what your world is like, if this problem is eliminated, then I know what that end goal is, right? How I solve it, right, is going to look very different. But as long as I get you to that end goal, you're happy, you're in a better place, right? And so that's what you're really trying to get to. All right, so one of the things that we're going to do really quickly, man, time is flying. All right, so we're gonna do some role playing where we're going to figure out how to ask some questions. So one of the things we like to do is something called an empathy map. And an empathy map is a way for you to figure out, when you're asking your questions, how to categorize the responses, right? So are the responses that people are giving you, is it about their feelings, right? Are they talking about how something makes them feel? So how the users feel about the experience, what really matters to them? Or are there responses telling you about tasks the users are trying to complete? Like, I'm trying to go through steps 1 and 2, but when I get 2, I get stuck because X, Y, and Z, right? What questions do they need answers? What are the influence, right? What people, things, and places may influence how the users act, right? Pain points. Pain points might be users' experience they hope to overcome, and what are the user's ultimate goal. And there's a couple different ways of looking at empathy map. This is one simple example. We're going to look at another one. I know I throw multiple things at you guys and sometimes it confuses you. I do that on purpose because I don't want you to get fixated on there's one way to do everything. And because that's entrepreneurship just doesn't work that way. You have to find what works for you. So this is one way of looking at an empathy map. And here is a second one that we're going to play a little bit around, right? And so this one is a little more simple to think about, right? Because as you, I like to use something like this when I conduct my interviews, because it's easier for me to think about what they're saying. And sorry, let me see if I can zoom in. Oops, no, that is not zooming in. Okay.
Forgive me, Wanda, did you say you'll use this page while you're in an interview, like scribbling your notes on this?
Yeah, I'll use something like this.
I like that.
What I'll do is I'll just take a notebook paper and I'll just draw quadrants, like, you know, thinking and feeling, seeing, hearing. And as I'm writing down the responses to my questions, I'm writing them in the quadrants, right? Because then that helps me when I go back and I'm reading my notes and they're talking about like, yeah, you know, when I'm going through these steps, okay, so that's kind of their, you know, what they're seeing, or, you know, how they were feeling, or that was a pain point for them, right? That was a gain. Because you're not going to capture, especially when someone's, you know, going through an interview, you're not going to capture all the things, but already having places to put their response is going to help me better reflect, especially as I'm going through multiple interviews, right? And I'm looking at all my different interviews and I'm being a little more consistent. What were the pain points of all of my interviews? What were the things that they gained, right? When I do this, you know, this happens and that makes me happy, or I would like these type of things to happen, right? What are the things that all my interviewees are feeling, thinking, seeing, right? I can do a quick snapshot of all my interviewees as opposed to like, you know, pages and pages of my, you know, my scribble scrabble and me trying to figure out. And even if I do that, that's fine. But I go back and I do my highlighter, right? So I'll get my yellow highlighter and I'm highlighting the pain points. I'll go back through with my green highlighter. So I'm kind of like, you know, dictating kind of how all these things are coming together, because that is going to be useful. Because what you don't want to do is have all this interview data that you don't know anything to do with, right? You got to organize it in a way that you can pull information out of all of them to see what is the story that is being told out of your interviewees. What is the common problem? What is the common need? What need is not being met when you go across all of your interviewees, right? And this is the type of thing you need to be able to find. So you have to make sure your interview data is useful. And so this is an example of an empathy map that is completed where you have, so with this one, and you always, again, I always put like the name of the interview in the middle. So I know, again, I don't always have this sheet. Sometimes it's just my notebook and I'm just kind of drawing my line so I know. And, you know, I write my interviewee at the top or something so I know who it is, right? And so this one is about fair trade coffee. And so in terms of what does this person think and feel? They're thinking and feeling a need to make a difference, fairness, freedom to choose, right? And these are just notes, because you're not going to be writing complete sentences, right, as people are talking to you. And even if you're recording, when you go back and listen to that recording, you're just going to kind of take your bullet point notes. So what are the highlights, right, of those conversations, right? In terms of the things that they're seeing TED Talks, they're seeing Facebook groups, they're seeing Netflix documentaries, right? The things that they're saying and doing, right? She takes short courses to keep learning. She attends Glastonbury every year. She shops at local shops, small and local, you know, and you go through and you're learning. This gives me a snapshot of my interviewee, right? So I can tell you all the things I learned in my 30-minute or 2-hour conversation with Anna in one sheet, right? And I can kind of give a quick synopsis. If I start interviewing people today, and I say my goal is to get to 100 people. So say it takes me a month to get to my 100 or 2 months or whatever to get to my 100. I'm not going to remember in full detail about my conversation with numbers 1 through 20, right? But having a way that I can abstract that data really easily, where I'm comparing 1 to 20 to 90 to 100, is really useful. And so just having a method of doing that is going to be very helpful. So what we're going to do is a little practice run of some of this. So we're going to do some breakout rooms. And so in groups of 3s, I want you to pick a role from the list below. So you're either going to be the interviewee, the interviewer, or the note taker, right? And you're going to pick from the questions on the list below. So improving air travel, recreating the grocery shopping experience, imagine a new way of vacationing. So if you are the interviewer, right, you are jotting down some quick questions, because this is not a long interview. So you're jotting down some quick questions to ask your interviewee. And the note taker, I want you, this isn't your resource page, but if you don't have a chance to pull it right now, just get you a sheet of paper or open up a document on your computer, or even it's just like a text document, and just write think and feel, hear, see, say and do, pain, gain, right? So just write those things down as a note taker. By the way, we're going to rotate. So at one point in time, the interview is going to be the interviewee, the note taker is going to be the interviewer. So we're going to rotate. So you've held all of the roles at some point in time. So I want you to kind of write down the different, either you, like I said, you could download the document that's in the resource page on the course site, or you can just kind of jot them down really quickly. If you guys want to do the one before, this is fine too, but just pick one. Just have it right now. It's really about organizing your notes as you kind of go through and do the interviews. So whichever you feel like works better for you. So you can do feelings, tasks, influence, pain point, and overall goal, if that works for you. And I'll switch back to the other one in a second if that one works better for you. And so if go ahead and start jotting. While we're doing that, you can start jotting down some quick questions on whichever one of those questions you want to interview on. And we're going to, like I said, go round robin and interview one person out of your group to kind of get a sense of what that process is like. And I want that note taker to kind of think through, where are the responses flying, right? So if the interviewer is asking interviewee questions and the response sounds like they're talking about a feeling, a task, an influence, right? Or if it's talking about what they're thinking and feeling versus what they're saying and doing, right? What they're seeing, what they're hearing, then you want to be able to jot the notes in those respective spaces. I want you guys to kind of give that. I'm giving you a few.
That again. Thank you.
Give you a second to pick out your question. And write down some questions really quickly. All righty. About 30 more seconds, and then we're gonna we can also broadcast this slide to every breakout room, if that will also help you guys to kind of know what to, if you get lost in the process.
May I clarify one thing? So right now we're to be kind of jotting down questions for whichever question we like, as with when we are the interviewer.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to share one more thing. So I just put a link in the chat that of another tool you guys can use as the interviewee, and you don't have to necessarily use this for this one. Again, if you're comfortable with your notes, that is fine. But depending upon what you have in front of you, this is a version of the same thing that I just shared. And so what you can do is you can modify this directly here. I think the one I shared might be the same one, so you can you guys can kind of create your different ones, but this is also an option. So as note taker, you can click in here, and so this is something you don't have to sign in, but you can just kind of sorry, there we go. You can't see it because I don't have it maximized. There we go. There we go. All right. So I can kind of write questions as I go. And therefore my group can also see it, but I don't want this to take up too much time because you're not going to have a lot of time. So if you feel confident in using this, if paper, but I want you to be able to kind of, again, experience the whole process in whichever role you're tasked to. Oops. All right. Are we good? All right. So breakout rooms are open. Please join your breakout rooms. Second. All right. I know that practice exercise is a little wonky, but sometimes just going through it on something that's not tied to you in any way, shape, or form is the way to kind of just get out of your head about doing an interview. How did that feel?
I really liked it.
Yeah.
It's funny because in the moment, as we're asking questions, it doesn't feel like we're asking a yes, no, or a leading question, but when you go back and you hear the feedback and realizing, oh yeah, I didn't really give them any space to answer that.
Yeah. And sometimes you think you created the bomb question, and when they hit you with, okay, I don't know, maybe, and you're like, no, that's not the answer I wanted.
Right.
So sometimes in the response, you realize where you missed the mark. The thing is, with the people we interview, we might not get a second chance, right? And so one of the things I always say, as you line up your interviews, start off with your low-hanging fruit. Like the first round of interviews, I always pull on my immediate family and friends, because that's where I'm going to see the quality of my questions. Or I start off with the people in your cohort, right? Which is what we're doing here. But then after that, you do it with your family and friends, and then you've done it a few times. So by the time you're doing to your true target audience, you know your questions are actually going to produce the kind of data you really want to see. And that is going to be really important for you. Go ahead, Lisa.
I'm sorry, as we write, so we'll start creating our list of questions. If we do that, I love the low-hanging fruit. If we start with just people around us, those then we'll eliminate maybe questions that don't apply, or is that what you mean, like family and friends will help us refine our questions, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because because they'll, again, just like you saw with this round, you saw Lisa, I was in a session with you where his answer completely threw you. And then it was just like, oh, okay. So now what, right? Now to be prepared for something like that, right? And you won't be thrown in the
go right into the next question, or
go right into the next question. And so it won't disrupt your flow, right? And the same thing, Atisha, you saw that some of the questions was like, oh wait, that didn't give me the answer that I was looking for. I was looking for a rich answer, and that gave me like 2 words, right? And then okay, I need to adjust accordingly, right? And so this is kind of where you're practicing with family and friends, even if they're not exactly your target audience. You're just kind of using them as a sounding board, right? Throwing paint at the wall. Does it stick? Does it flow? Do I need to tweak it a little bit? And then you take it into your true audience, but you're not testing out new questions on people that you really, really need to get this information from.
okay,
So,
thank you.
so what we're gonna do, man, for some reason, either I didn't manage my time right or class time is really flying today. So what we're going to do is it's your turn. So with the last 30 minutes of class, I want you to spend the first few, and we're going to try, we might not get to the role playing. What I wanted you guys to do is take some time to think of your interview questions. And then we were going to go back into that same activity of the breakout groups where you're testing your interview questions on each other. We might not have time to do that because I really want you guys to really think through your interview questions, and you might not have them all, but I want you to just kind of, you know, do that brain dump, right? Just kind of what are the questions that you thinking right now make sense to ask of your interviewees. But here's kind of the curveball. You might have more than one group of people that you're interviewing, right? Your target customer, end user might be multiple groups. You need different interview questions for them. All right, Atisha, you have the growers and the, no, I'm sorry. Yes,
Yep.
the growers and the, what's the second category?
Purchasers.
Purchasers. Those are different groups. Their interview questions will be different. You need to think about those questions very differently, right? Now, your base questions are going to be the same, right? Hi, my name is, right? My project is about, right? Building rapport. All of those questions are going to be the same for everybody. But then you're going to have to, your questions are going to tee out, right, into a tree. My questions for this group, my questions for that group. And that's if I have more than one target customer. I'm going to also want to interview some stakeholders, right? And I want you to at least interview, because some of your stakeholders are a lot of different types of people. Interview from at least one aspect or more from that list. So target customer, stakeholder, right? So you might have 2 to 3 different interview protocols at minimum, right? And so that doesn't mean they need to be long, but you want to make sure you're getting to the point of what is the need, right? Not, hey, I'm thinking about building this product, you know, the solution. Do you want it? In an empathy interview, at no point in time should you talk about the solution. That should never come up, because what you're learning is about them, their need, and their problem. And we learn from the don'ts, right? I can't ask you like, hey, so I notice you have a problem with this. Do you agree or disagree, right? That's not how you learn about their needs and their problems, right? You need to understand their worldview, right? You set the stage with the subject matter or the space that you want to ask questions, and then you learn about that subject matter from their perspective. And that's essentially what your interview questions are getting at. And so you want to be able to abstract as much as you can from your target customer about their, you know, their need, right? But also the stakeholder, right? Who are the stakeholders that you want to ask questions to, right? Is it a regulatory or review board, right? What are some questions you need to do to legitimize your business to make sure there's no loopholes that you're going to get caught up in that's going to defunk your business before you make it out the door, right? Is it a potential collaborator, or is it a potential resource, right, that your business builds off of? Say you're building a product that, you know, that is based off of another tool, right? With Nadine, with the platform that you're building, right? Your stakeholder could be, you know, any government entity that can tell you about some of the laws that are changing to know how viable your process is going to be in the future. Is there anything coming down the line that will disrupt your business model as the way you're thinking about it, right? Those are stakeholders who are not end user, but you don't want to build a whole system on a law that's going to change tomorrow, and then you're up the creek without a paddle. So these are kind of some of the stakeholders that you want to talk to now to understand, so what are the things that are going to affect, you know, your ability to solve this problem for your solution. And remember, we talked about kids and parents, right? Influencers are very important to your process as well. Is there a key influencer in your target customer and this problem and solution? Who do they listen to? Having conversations with those influencers is very important. If you're selling something to schools, right? Who do the schools listen to, right? If you're selling something to a particular type of the customer, who is it they're getting that information from now, or who influences their buying decision in that space? Those are stakeholders you want to have conversations with. That is going to be a different list of questions than that end user. So start thinking about these questions now. I'm going to give you guys about 5 minutes to jot some questions down, and we're going to kind of probably just stay together for a little bit and see how we're making do on those questions before we try to, you know, get back in some breakout rooms. Go ahead, Chris.
Are these questions all pertain to our business and like how we're?
Yep. These are the questions that you are asking of your potential customers or stakeholders for your the problem or solution your business is solving.
Okay.
Oops, sorry. Are y'all still using that screen? Okay.
It's tricky thinking of questions that can vary depending on their answer to the first question. Or the next prior.
So your first round, don't think about it. Just jot down questions. Remember the first round, you just brainstorm, you're just throwing questions down, and then you'll modify them on the second round. But initially, whatever question comes to mind, good or bad, however it's formatted, just get it out your head.
Ms. Horner, just so I can see if I'm in the right like direction, can I ask questions like, would you pay for a platform that gives you access to influential individuals of higher status? Does that sound like an actual legitimate question to ask?
So you would, actually, I'm gonna let Katie take this question. Katie, are you available to take this question? She might not be.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, so I would say, first of all, I think it's a little bit going towards a solution. I would stick with questions about like, you know, do Do you want to, have more connections with influential people? What, can you tell me a little about that? Who might those people be? How would you currently do that? And just ask them questions like that. And then if they, I don't know that I would get into paying for a platform yet, because I think that gives them a little too much information on where you're going with this and what you're hoping to do. Wanda, what would you say?
I totally agree. You're at this stage, you want to know what problem that they're having, right? And so your question was, would you pay for a platform? You haven't even gotten to what's the problem, right? Like, so give me your question again that you just said. Let's kind of explain that.
Yeah, this is the last question I have like a list of them, but I just wanted to know.
Just give me that one so we can dissect it.
Okay, I modified it, but it was, it used to be, would you pay for a platform that gives you access to influential individuals of higher status?
Okay, so before you get to a question like that, right? And this is why empathy interviews don't touch on that type of stuff. You want to know, like, what's your, you said that gives you access to someone of higher status. Sorry, I messed up that question again.
For the most part, yes. That's
all right.
It's what it says.
All right. So how do you currently access people of higher status that you interested, or do you currently access, and how, or do you currently access people of higher status, and how do you go about doing it, right?
Oh, okay. That's a good question.
So that's kind of a before question, right? Like, you don't even, like, that's kind of a getting at what are their, because you want to learn their worldviews. So how are they doing things now? What are they interested in now? Nothing about a platform, nothing about paying for a service. What is it now? So remember the John can't read. What's true right now? How do you get your information, right? How do you access these things?
Okay.
Go ahead, Katie.
The other thing that I would say, yes, and the other thing that I would say is, like, different people have different, who, like, a higher status influential person that they might want to reach out to is, like, I can tell you on my bucket list, and this is so nerdy, I want to have dinner with an astronaut. Now, you could say, like, some people, it might be a rock star they want to talk to, it could be a famous artist, like and even within that genre, it could be like, you want like a street artist, or you want a photographer or a fine artist, and then within fine artists, it dives down too. So you really need to know, when you throw out words that are large categories, you need to ask them to explain what it means to them. And you need to understand, like, the finer details of their answers, because I could be telling you that I want to reach out to higher status people, and I could be talking about astronauts, and that has nothing to do with what you're doing. So
Katie brings up a good point. You watch your terminology, because you don't know if they're interpreting things the same way you are. So, like, that term higher status is pretty vague. So you walk away with their response thinking it's in a particular context, and it might be something completely different. And so you want to break down vague terms to be very specific, to make sure you're abstracting the information you think you're getting out of them.
I appreciate it.
Welcome.
Wanda, are you going to be able to tell if our questions are totally off base?
I'm hoping to get you to a point that you can tell that. And what we're going to do, if you guys are making some good progress, you guys feel like you got a couple of questions down to test out on each other? Okay, I'm seeing some head nods. Okay, so with a little bit of time that we have left, we're going to go back into breakout rooms. And what we're going to do in our breakout rooms is we're going to, same process, we're going to interview each other. And then we can kind of see either between the responses that we're getting or from our note takers, kind of how our questions are appearing. And so hopefully that first round will kind of give you a taste of kind of how you're kind of doing with your questions. And then you'll have the weekend and stuff to review and edit your questions. Before we go into breakout rooms, I do want to mention one more thing. I see you at your hand, Lisa. What I want you guys to do is once you submit, I want you guys to get through these interview questions and submit them for our review. Once we give you the green light, because we want to make sure you have solid interview questions, I want you in the same time frame as you're submitting your interviews, I need you to start reaching out to your contacts and start scheduling interviews. It's really, really important that you get some solid interviews, right? And so in the next week, I need you to try to lock in about 10 solid interviews. I know that's a lot, but I want you to find a way. And the holidays, you're going to be around people, but I want you to find a way to kind of really get some solid interviews in there, right? So, so as you're working through your interview questions, reach out to people. Hey, do you have some time to talk next week? Even while we're giving you feedback, go ahead and start scheduling them. So once you get that green light from us and you're go with your interview questions, you're not now reaching out to people trying to get on their schedule. Sorry, I just realized my camera was off. Sorry about that. You're not now reaching out to people trying to get on their the calendar. Start doing that now. Start getting on getting those schedules lined up. You can use something like Calendly. Are you guys familiar with? Oh, a lot of you use Calendly to schedule your interviews with me. So go ahead and set up like a Calendly or something like that. So you give people options on getting on your schedule and start identifying those target customers and those stakeholders that you can get on your schedule and start lining up those interviews as soon as you can. And as soon as, like I said, as you guys get them in there, we'll give you that feedback rather quickly, let you know what changes. But when we say, you're good, we want you, because we don't want to happen is you have like 10 interviews and then we look at your questions like, oh, you got to do all that over again, right? You don't want to kind of waste that time. And so we really want to make sure, but that is really going to be you guys not holding those questions hostage. I don't care if you don't think they're great. When you think you got, them ordered and you got them together, send it in. Don't send in garbage. Make sure you put in some thought and you've done some research and putting it in your questions. And then, we'll help you refine them, right? But you got to put that legwork in. Go ahead, Lisa, and then Chris.
Well, I guess just thinking that you said, but not bringing up our solution. So then how do we word like the nature of the business? I wrote like, I'm involved in an entrepreneurial pre-incubator program. I'm working on fine-tuning my relevant stakeholders. I appreciate your time to help me gain clarity to find out what people really need. Is that fine? Do I not, because I'm not telling them what I do or how, where I'm poking?
Yeah, you could talk about the space that you're in, right? And so you can kind of talk about the general space with
not what my business involves.
Yeah, you're not going into what your business involved, but that space, right?
Okay.
Of like wholeness, wellness, right? Like all of that, right? You can definitely talk about that. Right. But you're not talking about your business. Like at this stage, put your business on the shelf. It doesn't exist. All you know is I have a person who has a problem and I think has a problem. And I'm trying to get from them what is truly their problem or need in this particular space.
Okay.
Why does that problem exist for them? And what are some things that they've tried, they're looking at, but haven't quite really met their need in that space. That's all you're trying to get out of this round of interviews.
Yeah, Lisa, you could even ask something like, would you classify yourself as like a maximalist or a minimalist when in your home? And what kind of environment feels really comforting and soothing to you?
And I have some like that, but not the, okay.
Yeah. And just get them to just talk about, because yeah, it might be that some people just like love having things everywhere, and that's what makes them feel great. So I think really asking them some questions and not assuming is important.
Okay, thank you.
All righty, everybody else ready? Oh, sorry, Chris, you had a question.
Yeah, it's kind of ludicrous. So one of my stakeholders is, well, two of them are schools. Do I just ignore them as far as like?
No, schools have people. Who are the people in the schools? Every level of a school, there's a decision maker. Who is the decision maker that you would need to reach out to and contact at that school? Every institution is made up of people. And I want you to think about those people. And if you don't know immediately, poke around, ask around, and that's fine if you have to still fill it in, but you got to hone in on who are the people. I
know I'm familiar with some teachers at Full Sail.
Not so much just the names, right? But the roles, right? What is the decision, right, that individual makes? So if it's, why are schools your stakeholders? Where do they fall in your stakeholder list?
Under high priority, because the nature of my app, I want to like have these people tested and ask these the students questions like, how do I improve, or where do I go from here once it's out? But before that, I know I have to talk to the.
Okay, wait, rewind. You said are these potential customers of your platform?
Yes, the students. Yes, ma'am.
The students are potential customers or users of your platform.
Those are my target audience.
So then it's the students you want to reach at the schools, not the schools.
Oh, okay. I see. I just thought it was in tandem because I need to talk to them, talk to the athletic department. And
again, why? Why do you need to talk to the athletic department?
Well, because I'm trying to make a platform for like athletics, for athletics. So like future football players or future basketball players or something like that, they'll have like a video or something proving how good they are, and then they'll put it on the platform. And then
so again, you're targeting students, not the athletic department.
Right, but the athletic department like would go through my business, see the people that they want to handpick and bring them into.
When you think about your end user, when you think about who is actually forking over the cash for your services, right? That is the end user. So when you think about what you're creating, who's paying for it? Is it the student, or is it the coaches? Is it the janitor in the athletic department? So you see what I'm saying? That's such a broad category. Who is actually buying this, right? And why would they want to buy this? What is their motivation? What is their problem that you're solving? Because all of them will have different problems. You're not solving the same problem for all of them. You have to identify who has the problem, right? And then from there, how are you solving their problem? Because then the point of the interview is having a conversation with them. Are you truly the one that has the problem, or is it someone else that has the problem that I need to talk to? That is your goal.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So Chris, I do think that they count as a stakeholder. I think you're right that coach counts as a stakeholder and would be someone who might influence. But I think in your high, like Wanda said, and who you want to be interviewing as your end user, it's the people who are actually using the app, who are paying the money. So
if the coach is your stakeholder, then you should know why he's the stakeholder. Why is he invested, right? Why is the coach invested? Is the coach influencing your end user? You know, are they
Yeah.
saying, hey, this is what's going to get you where you need to go? Is their influencer? Then you know the kind of questions you're asking them, right? So when they're influencing people, what are the kind of things they're seeing and they want to hear, right? Is the coach purchasing this for their students? Are they then an end user in terms of, are they purchasing it for the students to use? What kind of things, I think, what kind of things are they looking for to make that purchase, right? And so you got to, with everyone on your stakeholder map, you got to know why they're there and what's in it for them, right? What do they gain or lose because of the problem that exists that you're trying to solve?
Okay.
Is this helpful for you guys? Okay. I was gonna do the breakout rooms, but I feel like y'all are still flowing with your questions. So anybody else want to share questions? I feel like this is more useful, you guys sharing as a group and learning from each other. Dale, you want to throw out a question? Or some of your questions and see what you're looking, what you're working with?
Sure, not a problem. So my first question is, what do you think about books? Right? I left it real general so that they can tell me, you know, their exact interpretation. What do they feel about it? Do they like it? Do they not like it? Then from there, I would go ahead and see, well, how do you bring a book to life? And then they'll be like, oh, you know, what do you mean like that? So, and then I can go ahead and expound upon that as well. Like, when you read a book, are you using your imagination? You know, like, do you like to hear it read to you? You know, how do you like, you know, your books to be presented to you? That's another one. What do you think about digital advances in technology, like reality augmentation? I don't know if that was too specific to what I'm trying to do, but yeah, I just want to know what they feel about, are they tech savvy? Is this something that they feel that they can use? I'm sorry.
No, I think that's a good question.
Okay.
Yeah, like what's kind of your thoughts on that space, right? Because you don't know if someone who's into books is into digital media or augmented reality. So that's something that is good to know, like how, kind of what's their perspective on that, or their even, you know, their understanding of that space, right?
Yes. Yes.
And you might discover in a question like that they don't even know, that they don't know the difference between like augmented reality and virtual reality. So they might just start talking, you know. I do think that that's a good question just to kind of figure out where they're at as well.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. True. Yeah, I have more, but I don't want to take up everybody else's time. But those are the majority of the important ones that really stood out.
Okay.
Like, when was the last time when you read a book and it left an impact on you? That was another one. I just want to see what type of audiences would actually use my technology. Well, not my technology, but yeah.
Yeah, what audience has the need or problem that you're trying to solve?
Correct.
Yeah, now that makes
So
perfect.
Dale, I do think it's really important for you to ask about like what kind of books they read. Okay. Because it's very different, like if they're a romance novel reader versus a nonfiction, and even within nonfiction, there's so many different types of readers. So asking what genres they read might be a helpful thing to know.
Thank you.
All right, Sylvia, how are you doing on your questions?
Okay, so I'm doing all right. So mine is pretty much going to be geared towards procurement for the school board. Okay, so my first question is, what is your current procurement process? Okay.
Well, you said
then
I'm the school board.
Yes, okay. Procurement for local foods produced in the area. Okay. All right. And how can this procurement process be improved? Mm-hmm. What is your ideal number of procurement for local businesses, small local businesses? And then how many of these businesses do you have categorized as small?
Okay.
Okay. That's the far I got so far.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
No, that sounds good. So what is
Okay.
what is it that you're trying to abstract with these questions? What is it you're hoping to learn?
So I'm hoping to learn if it's a farmer and they wanted to have a procurement contract. So I'm trying to figure out the procurement process. Okay.
Okay.
And what does it do to qualify? So to see if they have small businesses, I'm trying to get a number. If they have, that's why I'm asking them about the small businesses and how many local businesses. So I'm trying to increase local small businesses procurement with the school board.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the information I'm trying to extract out of them. And what is that procurement process? What is the current procurement process?
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Sylvia, I've kind of existed in this public procurement area for many, many years. And a lot of the information that you're talking about right now is on the different agencies' websites. So you might want to do a little bit of research before you start asking, and then to get some of these preliminary answers. For instance, Palm Beach County puts out, and so does Broward County, they put out a list of their certified small or community businesses. So different places do put out that list, and schools sometimes do as well. And they also have, offices for equal opportunity. So I think that those are great questions. I do think you can find some of those answers on websites. The answers I don't think that you would find is how often you procure farmers and have farming contracts and work with agriculture or those sorts of contracts. That's something that you might be, or have there been any discussions about this? What do you, talking more specifically about that space might be helpful.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Katie.
Of course. And if you want to talk to me about some of that procurement process too, so I can give you just a little bit of a heads up, feel free to reach out.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All righty. We got about 2 minutes left. Anybody else want to share their questions or get some feedback before we wrap up?
I'll ask a quick question.
Mhm.
So I don't know if this is just like too leading, because I wanted to start off, so just focusing on the growers, how did you get into gardening? What was your path? I wanted to ask them though about how they feel about the costs associated. So at first I was saying, would you say that it is expensive to grow food? But that's a yes or no. And so I switched it to what costs are associated with your gardening, but I don't know if that's going to get me the answer I'm really looking for, which is this a pain point for them?
I think that's a good start off question, and you can do follow-up questions. So basically, based upon how they respond to that, you can do some follow-up questions to kind of dig deeper, but I think that's a good first question in that space.
I can share. So I have, after that, roughly how much per year do you spend on gardening? How do you feel about the costs associated with growing produce? But they can just say, great, like, oh, I feel good about it. So I'm still trying to figure out, I guess, how to tease that out.
You could ask how they track their expenses, or something like that, or tell me about, when you buy your supplies, what does that process look like for you, and how do you feel about the current environment of shopping for garden supplies? You might, I don't know. Wanda, what do you think about those ideas?
Yeah, that, and I think you can also add on how has that changed, right? Because with the cost of food and everything, how has that changed for them? I'm sure that would be, every time I've seen someone talk about the cost of rising food, so that would definitely be a very interesting question to see their response on.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, so I am hoping that, go ahead, Lisa. Last question before we wrap up.
I'm powering through them, but I'm still not sure that, can I just read them real fast, like a bunch of them? Like, and Katie's a little more familiar, I think it's what I'm doing, but what type of home do you live in? How many people are in your house? Describe your local support system. How often do you have friends come over to help you with tasks around the house? How would you identify your decorating style? What room in the house is most comfortable for you? Why do you think that is? And just breaking down then which room is the least used or least utilized. What is it about that room that you most enjoy? And kind of just poking, asking all kinds of questions about that without insinuating they might have clutter. Although I do get into how is overflow or excess or outdated items dealt with in your house? What do you do with no longer, used things? With their level of concern about overproduction of goods, how do they feel about recycling or repurposing? Where's their first choice of shopping for new goods? In what ways do they work together? Like that? I mean,
well, I think that's a good start. But remember, your end goal is to get their feelings about it, their views about it, right? Because like you said, someone could be living in clutter and totally loving it, right?
right.
Like I've met people who they live in clutter because they grew up without so much that having clutter makes them feel secure, which is different from their upbringing. And that's a whole different experience. So it's not so much as do you have clutter, but how do you feel about the clutter?
Right? That's like I said, which room is most comfortable for you? Tell me about that.
Yeah, but I don't know about some of those earlier questions, if they kind of help you get at that, right? And so with all of your questions, really think through what is the goal of this question? What am I hoping to abstract? And how is this information going to help me understand what is their problem and their need as it pertains to this space, and how are they currently addressing it, or what are the gaps that are being, that exist in, the options they have to address it right now, right? And so all of your questions are really trying to like help you hone in on that, right? So is it really like about do you have clutter, or how do you feel about the clutter, and what would you want to feel, right, if you didn't have the clutter, right? Helping them get from that now to the space that they want to be, right? And you're going to shape that solution, but you need to know their now, and you need to know where they want to go.
Okay.
And Lisa, I also think this kind of goes back to that question that we had. Is it about clutter, or is it about really like companionship and being there for people and helping them with those tasks? So if it's about, you could say, what's been a hard time in your life, and were you able to get the task done? And if not, what task, and what kind of help would you have wanted to have, or what, or I don't know, that's a little leading. Right. But you could ask them to tell you a story about that. But it depends on where you're going with your business. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, that's the assumption that everyone has clutter, I think, is getting in my way. Although with the work I've done, everyone has something, and I guess I've not looked at it as the people who are comfortable with it aren't calling me, or like I wouldn't work with them. I don't know. That's what it's just very interesting, bringing up.
Right, but like, you're trying to think of a uniform way of honing in on that audience that sees it and knows it, because there are people who are not calling you that should. And how do you get them there? But by helping them understand that you're solving a problem that they have, right? And so it's the cluttered home, cluttered mind, and I can't seem to get my life together, right?
Only if they want the overwhelming bugs.
Well, I might not identify the clutter. I just know I'm stressed because I can't get things together, right? So my problem is that, but I'm not seeing the clutter, right? I'm still of your audience, but you have to connect the dots for me by helping me see that you're solving my problem by helping me get to the declutter. But understand that my problem is stress. My problem is I can't stand being in
can you find things you want when you need them?
Right. So these are the problems that I'm having, right? And then the symptoms of that problem is this living space disorder, or that I'm dealing with. But I might not know that, right? All I know is I have a cough. You recognize that my cough is connected to my cold, and you have to point that out to me.
Okay, thank you. Glad we got a long weekend to work on this.
Yes,
When do we have to send questions?
Like I said, when you guys get them in, we'll review them as quickly as we can to
Shoot
give
them
you
in,
feedback,
okay.
so we don't delay you in terms of getting your interviews out. So it's all right. So we are a little over time, and I want to respect y'all time. Yeah, I can stay on if you have a question, Chris, but I want to let everybody else know, have a good weekend. Enjoy your holidays. Please be safe, and we will see you back here next Wednesday. Go ahead, Chris. What's your question?
Okay, I just wanted to know if there was like a minimum amount of questions we should ask, and how we know when we need to stop asking questions.
That is a good question. And that is going to be different, right? It's really about your goal is to find out, do they really have a problem in this space? What is that problem? How do they feel about that problem? What did they try to solve this problem in terms of having that need met? And how's it worked out for them? However many questions it takes you to get there, you do it, but also respect their time, right?